321. My name is Sherry Howder, and I'm just thrilled that you all are here, and I get to welcome you. We begin a brand new series today called How to Get What You Really Want. And you can't have it all, and you can't have it all now. But anyways, today we start this series, and our wonderful, amazing, funny, hilarious, and sometimes can even bring a tear to your eye. Our Student Ministries Director, Josh Tillman, is going to kick off our series for us this morning. So before we go any further, would you please stand with me? Let's pray together as we enter into some music and worship time. Jesus, thank you so much for this beautiful day, for the opportunity we have again to gather together, to see you, to hear you, to be encouraged, to be challenged. And God, I just pray that you would give us ears to hear, you would give us eyes to see, and a heart to embrace your truth this morning. May all that is said, may all that is sung, all that we do today in our greeting with one another and relationship with one another, but especially as we come just to see and to hear you, would you speak to us and would you be glorified in all things? We ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
This is a dream for the world to see you, a dream for the world to know you, to love your name. Lift up a shout, lift up a cry to shake the ground, shouting the walls are coming down, and we're running after you. Like a runaway train, no turning back, no more yesterdays. My heart is free, no chains on me. God, you raised me up from the grave with the cross before. I'm on my way, my heart is free, no chains on me. Yesterdays, my heart is free, no chains on me. God, you raised me up from the grave with the cross before. I'm on my way, my heart is free, no chains on me. Yesterdays, my heart is free, no chains on me. God, you raised me up from the grave with the cross before. I'm on my way, my heart is free, has come. Darkness bows down to the risen sun, the risen sun. Arise, raise your hands and sing to the one God, to the one God. You are the matchless King who tore down the gates of the enemy. Make way for Christ and sing. Let your kingdom come, let your kingdom come. Arise, for the battle's won. Oh, down to the risen sun, the risen sun. Arise, raise your hands and sing to the one God, to the one God. You are the matchless King who tore down the gates of the enemies. Make way for Christ and sing. Let your kingdom come. The light shine in. Let 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 your 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 light shine in. Oh, well, let your light shine in. Who tore down the gates of the enemies. Make way for Christ and sing. Let your kingdom come. You are the matchless King who tore down the gates of the enemies. Make way for Christ and sing. Let your kingdom come. Oh, let your kingdom come. Oh, let your kingdom come. Let your kingdom come.
Quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice, and the seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from my regard. And through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well. It is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me. Thank you so much for singing with us. You guys can have a seat.
So who I am, where I'm from, what I do? Okay. Hello, my name is Emerson St. Pierre. I'm a transplant from New Jersey, and I'm a musician, a self-taught musician. When I play a song that I absolutely love, it brings me to a place of just complete joy. When I'm by myself playing the piano, like I'm just in my mind, an empty room. I'm thinking about what can I do to be a better person? What can I do to make more money? Did I leave the stove on? I started traveling all across the world at 22. I've played in front of thousands of people. I've played with CeeLo on the Carson Daly Show back in the day, played all across Europe. I've done all these things, and I'm thinking, you know, there has to be more than this. Just looking over my life and figuring out what's the next thing, what's my why, where am I going, what I want to do. It's hard, and I don't have all the answers, but all of that comes out when I'm playing for myself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Josh Tillman, and I'm the Student Ministries Director here. And this is the Sunday after Easter, otherwise known as the Sunday that the youth pastor gets to speak. If you walked into most churches, I bet you'll find a youth pastor speaking, because God bless them, the lead pastors just had to give a Good Friday message and a bunch of Easter messages, and Greg did a great job last week. But he deserves a break, so you're stuck with me this week. And this week we're going to kick off a brand new series, and it's one that I'm really excited to. We're going to actually try to tackle one of the hardest questions probably of all time this morning. This is a question that has plagued man since the dawn of time. It's something that no matter how many different ways we try to ask it, no matter how many different times we think about it or sit around campfires talking about it, it's really hard to find an answer for it. It's a question that keeps us up at night. It's a question that's kind of been something that's always been on our mind. It's been in our literature. We've painted paintings about it. We've written poems about this question, and we've even sang songs about this question.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want.
I don't think I can say it better than the Spice Girls. The question we're trying to answer this morning is, what do you want? If you want to be my love. What do you want? What do you want? That's not rhetorical this morning. Just think about that. What is flooding into your mind as you hear that question? What do you want? Because at the end of the day, we all want something, and our wants look different, but we all want something. And I think we don't really realize it, but our wants control a lot more of our lives than we realize. Our wants are often our motivations. Our wants control our motivations. Think about it. When you were trying to get into a college, you had a college you wanted to get into. So that motivated you to do well in high school, motivated you to get good grades, to join the National Honor Society, to turn in a good resume, a good application. It motivated you to do well so you could get into that college. Maybe you want to live in a certain neighborhood or drive a certain car, and so it motivates you to get a job and work overtime so you can get the promotion to afford to live there. Maybe you want to date a certain guy or a certain girl, and you find yourself listening to music you don't like because they like it, or you're a guy and you're watching The Bachelor because you're like, I just want to have something in common to talk with her about. But what we're motivated by is our wants. Our wants kind of control our motivation. And our wants are tricky. And we're going to spend a lot of time this morning just talking about how tricky our wants are and how tricky the answer to the question, what do you want, can be. But our wants, while they're tricky, our wants can also be extremely frustrating. Or when we don't get what we want, it can be extremely frustrating. I remember it was Christmas like '06. I was probably like, that would be 11 years old. So I was probably a little bit younger. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. And Christmas was coming around, and so my parents were asking the question that all parents want, or all parents ask is, what do you want for Christmas this year? And I'm a big fan of animals. Actually, I found a baby mouse last night in our home, and my wife was like, kill it! And I put it in this little tissue box, and I'm trying to keep it warm to nurse it back to health. But that's a really quick side note. I was up till like 1 in the morning with this little mouse. I had to put milk on a Q-tip and was feeding it. Yeah, not a part of my message, but I like animals, and I used to ride my bike when I was a kid to our local pet store, and I would stand there, every day in the summer, and I would stand there with my nose against the glass, and I'd watch the lizards and the fish and the snakes, and they all knew me by name there. And so this particular Christmas, well, I got a lot of pets. I owned a lot of different things. I had turtles, I had crabs, I had pet crabs. That did not come out even close to the way I wanted to. I had pet crabs growing up. And so this one particular Christmas, I really wanted this gecko that they had at the pet store. So when my parents would ask me, what do you want for Christmas? The first thing out of my mouth was this gecko. When I was making my Christmas list, the top of the list was this gecko that I really wanted. It was my Red Ryder BB gun that year, if you will, for my Christmas Story fans. And so Christmas morning comes around, and I book it down the stairs, and I look at our tree, and I was expecting to see a terrarium with like a little heat lamp and a gecko kind of like stuck to the glass, just like, what up, dude? Merry Christmas, here I am. But I looked around, and I didn't see that. I saw a lot of wrapped presents, and I thought to myself, either the lizard has suffocated and died, or I'm not getting what I want for Christmas this year. And so we tore through all the presents, and I didn't open the lizard. And so my mom and I were sitting on the couch just before we headed off to my grandparents' house for our annual Christmas dinner. And she looked at me. She said, well, did you get everything you wanted? And up until this point, I've been holding the emotion and the disappointment in really well. But something about that question caused me to bubble up and just burst out in tears. My head was on her lap. I was sobbing. And this is a real sentence that came out of my mouth at some point in my life. I was like, I wanted a lizard. You know, it was just like having this hysterical fit over it. And I was really frustrated because I wasn't able to get what I want. And it turns out when we went to my grandparents' house, the lizard was there, and my parents had just fooled me. It was a great surprise, one of the best surprises. But we've all had our lizard moments. We've all had moments where we didn't get what we wanted, and it turned up all of this emotion in us. Turned up all of this frustration, because no matter how hard we tried, no matter how many times we said we wanted it, no matter what we did to try to get it, we couldn't get what we wanted. Maybe that's a position you find yourself in this morning. Maybe you're amidst a job or a career that you're not getting what you want out of that job or career, and you're so frustrated that you're about to just walk away and give up. Maybe you're in a marriage this morning that you're not able to get what you want out of it, and you are so frustrated and so tired of trying to get what you want and not getting it that you're ready to give up on the marriage. Or maybe you can't get what you want out of life. Life just hasn't turned out to be what you wanted it to be, and you're ready to give up and to just check out. And if that's you this morning, I'm really glad you decided to walk in the doors, because we're going to talk a lot about our wants and how tricky they can be and what Jesus says about our wants and desires this morning. But our wants are tricky. What do you want? When I ask that question, a lot of things probably come flooding into your head. You're like, I want a Coke, or I want a Pepsi, or I want a cat, or a dog, or an Xbox, or PlayStation. We're a house divided this morning. But there's lots of things that you want, but there's a couple things that are universal across all of us that we want, that we're going to look at this morning, and we're going to specifically look at how tricky these things can be. So the first thing that all of us want is we all want our way. We want our way. No matter, you may not admit it to yourself, you may not think it consciously, but you want to get your way. But the problem is, as long as you insist on having your way, you won't be able to get what you really want. Because a lot of times in order to get our way, we get in our own way, and we end up losing our way. Like the last time you got in a fight with your spouse, or you wanted something to be a certain way, so you did everything you could. You put your foot down. You made passive-aggressive remarks. You gave them the cold shoulder in order for you to get your way. And you got your way at the end of the argument. You won the argument, but you lost the relationship in the process. Or that meeting you were in, or your job where you're like, this has to be done this way. You used your position of authority. You used your big personality. You kind of bullied through so that you got your way. But in the process, you lost the respect of your team. See, our wants are a tricky thing because even sometimes when we get what we want, we end up losing what we want. The next thing that all of us want is we all want to do what we want to do. We all want to be able to do what we want to do. That's what the weekend was created for. We all used to work 7 days a week, and we're like, enough of this. I want a couple of days just to be able to do whatever it is that I want to do. But the problem is, if we always do what we want to do, you may end up in a place that you don't want to be. This is especially true for me when it comes to food. I love food. Easter is a phenomenal holiday. The food that comes with Easter is also phenomenal. My wife made some bomb cheesy potatoes this last Sunday. Very proud of her. Reese's eggs. I'm not a candy guy, but Reese's eggs come out around Easter, and those are my weakness. Absolutely. Extra peanut butter in them, and they're fresh because they're only like seasonal. You know, I love Reese's eggs. I love food. But if every time I had a craving for food, and the foods I want to eat specifically, if every time I had a craving for food, I gave into that craving, I did what I wanted to do every time, I would not end up in a place I want to be. I wouldn't be able to keep this toned and slim figure that you see in front of you this morning. If I gave in every time I wanted a certain food, I'd probably end up looking a lot more like that. I'd be like those people from Wall-E in those little hover wheelchairs just driving around. But this is true not just for me and food. This is true for all of us. If we do what we want to do, we may end up in a place that we don't want to be. And this next one, this is a really tricky one. This is one we have to be really careful with because it's dangerous. But the next one is we all want perpetual pleasure. And I'm hesitant to even use that word pleasure because we often associate pleasure with, right, a good book on a rainy day. No, we often associate pleasure with something sexual. It's usually associated with like a sexual term, which is why when I started at Chick-fil-A, I got into a lot of trouble because as a Chick-fil-A employee, when someone says thank you, you're supposed to say my pleasure. But when you grow up in church and you work at a church, it's just beat into your head that the word pleasure is synonymous with all sorts of great evils. But I eventually got over that because pleasure isn't just sexual. Pleasure can come from a lot of different things. It's just playing around at golf, or maybe it's photography. It's just spending time with friends or family or working on a project and getting it done. Pleasure comes in all sorts of forms and different forms for all of us. But something that's true about all of us is we all want pleasure. We all seek out pleasure. But the problem with perpetual pleasure is that perpetual pleasure, that's hard to say, perpetual pleasure, whether it's legal or illegal, is addictive. It's possible to get too much of a good thing, and eventually perpetual pleasure loses its pleasure. Because something that started out as a pastime has become a pathway. And you started repeating that thing, and it's actually begun to control you. And now you think to yourself, I want to go back and not get the thing that I wanted and not repeat doing the thing that I wanted because now I can't stop doing it. And something that used to bring you such joy, something you used to do in your free time, is something you can't stop doing because perpetual pleasure will eventually lose its pleasure. And this next one's especially true of us who live in America. We want what we want, and we want it now. I mean, we have coined the term fast food. But isn't it true that what we want now is not always what we want later? We could all get up here and share a story of something that we thought we had to have and something we thought we had to have right now. But as it turned out, the longer we had it, the more we realized we didn't actually even want it. Because the tricky thing about our wants is they grow and change as we grow and change. The things you wanted when you were 12, 15, 18, 20 years old are different than the things that you want now. And a lot of times what we want today can end up in the way of what we want tomorrow. I mean, hasn't social media taught us this, if nothing else? Like, have you ever been on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all the other ones, and you get like a friend request from someone that you used to have a crush on, or it's like your boyfriend from high school, and you haven't talked to him in a while, so you go to their profile and you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, this isn't the person I used to have a crush on. This is just a fatter and balder version of that person. And you think to yourself, I'm grateful for unanswered prayer in this situation. Imagine if you were married to the first person you wanted to be married to, or the first person you prayed that you would be married to. Nervous, laughter all around the room. Because sometimes we're thankful for those unanswered prayers, because what we want now isn't always what we want later. This is true of me. Like, I remember when I was 18 years old, I bought this BMW because it was like I really wanted a cool car. I had a little extra income. I was used to driving my grandma's hand-me-down Kia Optima, and I really wanted something fun and exciting, and so I bought this BMW that I saved my money for, and I was excited to show it off. And I remember just driving around for the first few weeks and everybody seeing it and getting compliments and just how good that made me feel for a little while. But then I also remember the first time that I got a bill for the maintenance on the car. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure that this is really what I want anymore. It was kind of getting in the way of my financial security because at 18 years old I was dumping all my money into this car. And what I wanted then wasn't really what I wanted anymore. And it led me to have this really nasty little R word that makes us uncomfortable to talk about, but it led me to a little bit of regret. And regret is really tricky. And this is where we have to be careful because our wants can really quickly lead to a regret. Because isn't it true that regret usually, just think of a regret you have, doesn't have to be your biggest one, it can just be a regret, but doesn't regret often begin with I want? Don't your regrets often begin with I want, and then don't they end with I want to go back and not get the very thing that I wanted? I want to go back and not get the thing that I wanted. I want to go back and tell those friends you are no longer my group of friends. I wish I could go back. I want to go back and not take that job. I want to go back and not say I do. I want to go back and not try that thing, not go to that place. Because regret really is the inability to go back and get what you want now because you got what you wanted then. Our wants are tricky. And if we're not careful, they can end up being regrets. They can end up getting in our way. You have to be careful, not what you wish for, but you have to be careful what you want for. Because just to review, if we always get our way, we will get in our way and we're going to end up losing our way. If we always do what we want to do, we may end up where we don't want to be. And what we want now isn't always what we want later. And this isn't just an issue that we're going to talk about here in Sylvania in 2018. This is something that has always been an issue, this thought of like uncontrolled wants and figuring out the answer to the question, what do you want? It even dates back to the first century church and even the half-brother, think about it, half-brother of Jesus. James, who's the half-brother of Jesus, and how cool is it that we get to read a book that was written by somebody that grew up with Jesus? So if you have your Bibles, we're going to be in James this morning, spoiler alert. But as Greg always says, what would it take for your siblings to convince you that they were God? The story of James really is incredible. But James is actually going to give us a big insight into this concept of wants and desires and what that means if we let it go unchecked. And so James writes this letter. He doesn't write it to anybody specifically. He kind of just writes it to people, and it ends up in the Bible. And that's where we're going to look this morning in James 4. And we're going to start in verse 1. So if you have your Bibles, you can flip there. And if not, it will be on the screen. And so James starts out chapter 4, verse 1 with this. He says, "What is causing the quarrels and the fights among you?" James does what all good pastors do. I'm going to let you in on a trade secret. They just kind of throw out one of these like really big, vague questions to try to intrigue you, like, what do you want? Like, what is causing fights and quarrels among you? He's kind of baiting his audience in. He's saying, hey, do you want to know what's causing relational tension? Do you want to know what led to your divorce? Do you want to know what leads to that fight you always have with your spouse? Do you want to know what led to that job loss? Do you want to know what led to your sister not talking to you for 15 years? Do you want to know what leads to fights and relational tension. To which we as the readers, and I'm sure everyone that's ever read it is like, yeah, I would love to know what leads to it, because maybe if I know the problem, I can more easily find the solution, or maybe I can figure out who I should blame. But James is going to go on, and he's going to kind of point the finger back to us, because he finishes up that verse, and he says, what is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires within you? And the original Greek term for that evil desires, that word just means pleasures or our wants. What is causing the fights and the quarrels among you? Don't they come from the pleasures? Don't they come from the desires that war within you? James is saying, you and I are having this war of wants inside of us. Whether it's a want relationally or possessionally or any type of other want you may have, there is a war between us and what we want that is going on inside of us. And it spills out onto all of the people around us, and it causes conflict, it causes fight. It may even cause broken relationships. And I just want you to think back to the last relational conflict that you were involved in. It could be something that has followed you your whole life. It could be something that just happened last Sunday and Easter, because you're like, yeah, when my family gets together, there's bound to be some conflict. Maybe it was the van ride to church this morning where you're about to strangle your little toddler, and then you walk into church like, hey, everybody. But the last relational conflict that you were involved in, I'm willing to bet started because one of the two parties involved was not getting something that they wanted. Whether it was this unspoken expectation, whether it was justified want or not, somebody was not getting what they wanted, and it led to conflict. James goes on to touch on this in the next verse. He says, you want what you don't have, so you scheme and you kill to get it. To which we just check out. We're like, okay, I've never killed anybody. I'm good. This doesn't apply to me. I'm going to start opening up Facebook now. You're like, yeah, Josh, I remember you saying something about regrets, but I've never killed anyone. I'm off the hook. But James isn't writing this to somebody specifically. He's kind of using hyperbole. He's going to the extreme to make a point. He's not writing this to a murderer saying like, hey, this is why you killed somebody. He's just writing this to people, and he's saying that this is something that you do, and he's probably not that far off. Aren't most murders probably committed because someone's trying to get something that they want? But let's just kind of peel back the extremeness of this statement and bring it into our own lives. We think maybe we don't think that we scheme, but that's not true. The last time you wanted something, and you thought it was going to be difficult to get it, didn't you come up with 1,000 different ways to try to get it? Didn't you have different conversations in your head with your spouse or your boss or your siblings or your parents and how you were going to try to convince them and manipulate even in order to get the thing that you wanted? We all do that. And then he says we kill, and we're like, no, we don't. But we've seen uncontrolled wants kill political aspirations. We've seen uncontrolled wants kill a sports career. We've seen uncontrolled wants ruin a franchise. And in your own life, you've been willing to kill relationships in order to get what you want. You've been willing to kill your integrity in order to get what you want. You've been willing to kill your reputation, your relationship with a lifelong friend in order to get the thing that you want. James is not off on this. I think he hits it right on the head. Because this is something that we all do in our life. And James' point is that if you allow your wants to get out of control and you don't harness in and pay attention to your heart's response when you hear the question, what do you want? You have the potential to destroy everything in your life that is of value to you. You see, our wants are very tricky, and the stakes are very, very high. He goes on to say, you are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it. So you fight and you wage war to take it away from them. And isn't this just truly the ugliest part of us? When we see somebody else doing better than us and we kind of secretly root against them, or they have something that we can't get and we kind of hope that it gets taken away from them. And just because somebody's doing better, we try to downplay their accomplishments. We kind of gossip about them. We try to paint them in a bad light when we talk about them just because they have something that we want that we don't have. Isn't this truly just kind of one of those moments where you catch yourself in one of these ways of thinking, and you're just like, oh, that is so ugly, that's so bad, I hope nobody ever hears the thoughts. And it's all because somebody else has something that you don't want, or that they have something that you don't have that you want. And sometimes when we get our way, as we looked at earlier, we can get in our own way, and it can be dangerous. And James is saying when we don't get our way, it can lead to conflict and fighting and broken relationships. And that's why this series is not called How to Get What You Want, because I'm not sure that we should all get what we want. That's why this series is called How to Get What You Really Want. Emphasis on the really want. Because most of us don't know what we really want because we are so distracted by what we want. We are so distracted by our desires and our appetites and the things that are fed to us in order to quench that appetite, in order to fulfill those desires, because those are the things that are most marketable. That's what's most easy to market to, is the things that we can have, that we can hold, that are tangible, that we can get in the immediate, something that we can get right now. But if we spend our entire life focused on what we can get right now out of a relationship, what we can get right now out of an opportunity, what we can get right now to satisfy those surface level wants, we run the risk of missing out on the joy of getting what you really want. And most people don't know what they really want because they don't stop long enough to figure it out. And nobody can figure this out for you besides you. You have to be the one to figure it out. And that's even a difficult thing, because what we really want exists in a part of us that we rarely explore. The thing that we really want, it's easy to see our wants because they're so surface, they're so immediate, but the things that we really want exists in a part of us down in our hearts that we rarely explore. And nobody's going to point you in this direction. You're not going to be able to turn on the TV and see slogans directed at this or see the news directing you this way. But Jesus always was directing people when he was teaching back this way. He was always trying to get his disciples to see things from this perspective. He was always trying to get people to live out and understand. He wants us to know and to understand that what we want in the immediate may not be what we really want. Jesus would look at us and say, you want to be first? You should actually want to be last, because when you humble yourself and serve somebody, that's going to speak way more volumes to the people around you than if you elbowed your way to the front. Jesus knew that what we wanted in the immediate may not be what we want in the long run, may not be what we really want. And James continues, and he says, and he's going to say something a little bit offensive here this morning, and it might make you kind of react, but pay attention to that, because he says, yet you do not have what you want because you do not ask God. You do not have what you want because you do not ask God, which is offensive to us this morning, because we have one of two reactions when we hear that. We either think to ourselves, well, why would I ask God if he's just going to say no anyway? I remember saying that to my parents. Maybe if you're a parent, you've heard your kids say that. Well, why would I ask you if you're just going to say no anyway? And our second response to that is, I absolutely have asked God. I've asked God 100 times in 100 different ways, and he still won't give me what I want. And maybe that frustration is why last Sunday was your first Sunday back in church in a long time. Or maybe it's why you walked away from the church, you walked away from God or your faith. Or maybe it's why, even though you're here this morning, you are barely hanging on because you feel like God will not give you what you want. But James has something to say to that. In the next verse, he says, and even when you do ask, you do not get it because your motives are all wrong. And that translation for all wrong is kind of, it doesn't really fit, the actual Greek definition doesn't really fit in English grammatically, but the actual Greek word for that term, all wrong, is this word right here. It's kakos. Let's all say that together. Kakos. I would like a piece of kakos. Yes. And the definition of this word is troublesome, injurious, destructive, baneful, and evil that which injures. James is saying the thing you're asking for, it's not really a matter of your motive. The thing you're asking for is going to do more harm than good. And he goes on to finish the verse. He says, and even when you do ask, you don't get it because your motives are going to give you more harm than good. You want only what will give you pleasure. You see, it isn't the fact that you have this evil desire. It's not the fact that you have wrong motives, because a lot of us hear that and we're like, why is my motive evil, or why is my desire bad to have a good job so I can provide for my family? He's not saying that, but what he's saying is you don't get what you want because what you're asking for is going to do more harm than good. It's not about your motive. It's about what you're asking God for. And God knows you better than you know you. And God knows that what you're asking for is going to do more harm than good. And all it's going to do is satisfy a surface level want that you've been told you need. And if he gives you that, it's going to enable this really vicious cycle that we call the if only then cycle. If only I was with her or with him, then I would be happy. If only I lived in that neighborhood or drove that car, then I would have finally made it. If only I looked like, if only I was more, then I would be happy. But the problem with that is we get our if onlys, and then we're still not happy. We're still frustrated. We still feel like we can't get what we want. And James right here is referring to the wants that we have that serve no other purpose than just temporarily satisfying a want. But the good news is God, your Father, wants more. He doesn't want more from you, because a good parent doesn't want more from their kids. God, your Father, wants more for you. He said, I have come to give you life, to give it abundantly, to give you life to the fullest. And life to the fullest does not look like the if only then cycle. It doesn't look like you being so frustrated by your wants and your inability to get what you want that you're ready to walk out. I have come to give you something that's so much bigger, that's so much better. But we have to be willing to look for it. Because it's so easy to see the immediate want and be distracted by all the things we want and miss out what we really want. But just beneath the surface of the things that we want are the things that we value. Just beneath the surface of all the immediate, of all the things that we think we want, the things that we get so caught up in, are the things that we value. And this is the big idea for the day. So if I've lost you, or if you forget everything else I say today, which you probably will, but that's okay, just remember this one thing, that you'll never get what you really want until you discover what you really value. You will never be able to get what you really want until you discover what you really value. You can spend your entire life chasing this endless list of temporary wants that ultimately are surface level and aren't really what you want. You can spend your entire life being frustrated by the if only then cycle, in this cycle of not being able to get what we want and then getting it and then being frustrated because it's still not what we want. But God, your Father, wants something bigger for you. He wants a life that is better for you. And until you discover what you really value, you will not be able to get what you really want. And in the next few weeks, Greg's going to talk about how we can discover the things that we really value. But until then, what do you want? What do you really want? Because you will not be able to get it until you discover what you really value. Let's pray. Father, we're just so grateful for this message and just this reminder that as frustrating as the surface level wants and as frustrating as the cycle of not getting what we want can be, you stand and say, I have something bigger for you and I have something better for you. Father, I just pray that as we move throughout our week, that this would be at the forefront of our mind, that we'd be able to figure out what are the things that we really value so we can be able to get the things that we really want. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Well done, Josh. Well, just a couple of announcements before we head out this morning. Starting next Sunday, April 15th, 22nd, and 29th, I want to invite all and any of you to come back Sunday evenings from 6 to 7:30. Yes, it's going to be me. I'm going to be teaching a 3-week series called Identity Theft, and it's going to be talking a little similar to what we just talked about, this war that battles within us. Some of us may know it as spiritual warfare, I don't know, whatever phrase you want to use, but we're going to be talking and looking at, especially in 2018, this whole thing of Satan, our enemy, and how in the world does this affect? Is it even real? Is it not real? Why do I struggle with this? Why do I struggle with that? Why do I have all these thoughts that go in my head? Why is this thing that is inside of me? So that's going to be starting next Sunday night for 3 weeks, the 15th, the 22nd, 29th. Hope you will come back. Childcare will be provided. If you are with us for the first time, thank you so much for being here today. If you would take a moment as you walk out these doors and head to the left to our information area, we'd love for you to fill out a welcome card and if you would, or a guest card, and if you would do so, we will give you a free Church 321 mug for you to do with whatever you would like. If you are and not been a part of a life group, we would really encourage you to look at life groups and to consider it is how we do life together, men, women. It is sometimes we're studying a book, sometimes it's talking about what we talked about on Sunday mornings, but it is groups of men and women coming together to do life with God, with one another. So we have a wall that is in that information area that has our life group information there. Write down a phone number, an email. Feel free to contact those leaders, and we would encourage you to get involved with a life group. If you came today with a gift that you would like to give, we have boxes on both sides of the wall that you can give as you leave, or we encourage you to go to our website, church321.com, where you can give there. So thank you so much for being here today. And remember, to get what you really, really want, you have to take time this week to discover what you really value. Have a great week, and we will see you next Sunday.